and again, I'm reading Martha's. The UNIDOP is one of the highlights of this year's activities for the NGO Committee on Aging. We've been organizing the observance in coordination with the UN DESA for 30 years. Cynthia Stuen, the current chair of the NGO Committee on Aging in New York, has some reflections for us now on how it got started, who some of the key players were, and where the UNIDOP fits into the 75-year history of the UN itself. Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martha. And I want to give my own special welcome to everyone around the globe to this first virtual International Day of Older Persons. It really is gratifying to see people from so far and yet so near, and that we all share one global community. The UN is 75. When the UN was created in 1945, the average life expectancy here in the United States was 63 for men, 68 for women, and in less developed countries, far less. So, UN at 75 is quite old by that standard. Next slide. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights that His Excellency Bosker just referred to in 1948. I was really pleased to hear him reference that, but I would like to point out that the declaration states, quote, that there is that we're entitled to rights and freedoms set forth without regard to, quote, race, color, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Notice there is no reference to age. So I think aging wasn't exactly on the radar screen of the founding members of the United Nations. Well, how did that come about? Well, on this slide, you will see on the 14th of December in 1990, the UN General Assembly designated the 1st of October as the International Day of Older Persons. Originally, it was designated as the International Day of the Elderly, but a few years later, it was changed to Older Persons. Also note that the next year, the GA, by resolution, adopted the UN principles for older persons. So what was happening at the UN? Who were the people who made a mark and championed our cause? Next slide, please. I'd like my section today to be a tribute and dedication to all those people, past and present. Certainly, I want to start with a dedication to Julia T. Alvarez, the former ambassador, alternate representative of the Dominican Republic to the United Nations, to the UN agencies, particularly DESA and the focal points on aging, program on aging directors and staff throughout UN agencies, our own UN NGO committees on aging, which were established in New York, Vienna, and Geneva in 1977, to the UNIDOP co-chairs and chairs. They put such tremendous amount of work each year into making this observance extremely relevant and celebratory, and also to the civil society organizations working in this space. Next slide, please. The late Julia T. Alvarez was a critical voice that raised awareness of aging issues at the United Nations. She was ambassador, the alternative representative of the Dominican Republic, and her career began at the UN in 1978. Her brother was actually the ambassador and actually appealed to her to come and be his alternate and help him. And she was the one who is really very credited with being the force behind the establishment of the International Day. Next slide, please. Alex Kalash knew Julia Alvarez very well, particularly while he was still in London working and also participated in the Second World Assembly. And while he was director of aging programs at the World Health Organization, he referred to Julia, and I quote, a giant, a great champion for older persons. She had passion, commitment, and charisma. He told me how she would walk into a room of ambassadors and be quite capable of shaking her finger in their face and telling them what they needed to do and how they needed to vote on issues related to aging. He also said she was one of the most vocal opponents of the mandatory retirement age of 60 at the UN. That tells you something about where the UN was back then. Dr. Kalash also referenced people from AARP who were very helpful to Julia in raising awareness of issues of aging internationally. Next slide, please. Charlotte Nussberg, former, actually did work for a few years as Secretary General of IFA, told me a very interesting side story that I want to share with you. AARP founder Ethel Percy Andrus always thought that there should be an international involvement of older persons. And as a result, AARP was a catalyst for the founding of the International Federation on Aging in 1973. And IFA was one of the first organizations to call for a World Assembly on Aging. First one was actually held in Vienna in 1982. Charlotte shared with me that she worked on a document for IFA titled Rights and Responsibilities of Aging. Charlotte took the document to Julia Alvarez to see how to get it adopted at the United Nations. Julia immediately said, rights will not work, but principles will. In addition, according to Charlotte, it eventually lost the responsibilities, but this document became the United Nations Principles for Older Persons, adopted by the General Assembly in 1991. Next slide, please. Alexander Sidorenko, or Sasha, as he is affectionately called by everyone who knows and works with him, was head of the UN Program on Aging, first in Vienna as of 1988, and then in New York from 93 to 2009. A long tenure indeed, Sasha. And he also served as the coordinator of the International Year of Older Persons, and then on to coordinate the MIPA planning program. When I asked him about what he thought were major contributions, he says, and I quote, I reckon the observances of IDOP during the years of preparing for and celebrating the International Year of Older Persons in 1999 were of utmost importance, end of quote. He called out the positive fact that there were regular contacts between the UN Secretariat, the NGO committees on aging, and felt that COA in New York was instrumental in connecting the UN to various partners in civil society, citing specific examples of AARP, FIAPA, Help Age International, IAGG, and IFA. Next slide, please. Meet Terry Hockenstad. He reminded me that the Berlin Wall had come down in 1989 and had opened up Central and Eastern Europe. He noted those countries were aging more rapidly, and there was a thirst to enhance their educational infrastructure with a tremendous interest in the field of aging. Terry served as co-chair of the US Planning Committee for the International Year of Older Persons that took place in 1999. The year was launched, however, on October 1st of 1998 with a theme of Towards a Society for All Ages, with the keynote speech delivered by Secretary General Kofi Annan. In his speech, he said, and I quote, "We live in an age to which many labels have been attached. It is the post-Cold War age, the post-industrial age, the age of the internet, and the age of globalization. He added one more that day, the age of longevity. He went on to say, a society for all ages does not caricature older persons as dependents, as pensioners. Instead, it sees them as both agent and beneficiaries of development. It seeks balance between supporting dependency and investing in lifelong development. Terry also served on the Independent Expert Committee working to develop the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, MIPA, as we all call it, which marked another milestone, the Second World Assembly on Aging, and then the subsequent adoption of MIPA in 2002. I'm coming now to my end as I focus on this past decade, leading up to 2020. The Millennium Development Goals, 2000 to 2015, made no mention of older persons, but the planning for the follow-up for the Sustainable Development Goals had begun. Next slide, please. Let us watch a brief video with Helen Hamlin, former chair of the NGO Committee on Aging and a fellow UN representative of the IFA. She was invited by AARP to celebrate their first observance of IDOP at their headquarters in Washington, D.C., which took place October 1st, 2013. Let's listen to the words of Helen.
Hello, I'm Helen Hamlin. I represent the International Federation on Aging at the United Nations, and I'm very excited and so pleased to be here at AARP headquarters to help celebrate and launch their first International Day of Older Persons in the headquarters. So we're doing a general job at the United Nations. We're working now on a convention for the human rights of older persons, and we're very much invested with our colleagues and partners in pursuing that with the member states at the UN. Planning for post-2015 has been underway now for almost a year, if not a little more, to learn from the mistakes or the omissions in the Millennium Development Goals. And the most important omission in my eyes and in the eyes of my colleagues is that there was not one word saying aging or elder or older person in those development goals. So our efforts have been mammoth at the current time and for the past 10 to 12 months around making sure that the member states and the people working on the next step will make sure to have older persons included in our language that we're asking them to look at and to incorporate. So it talks about people of all ages, not just older people, because we stress that as older persons, we are very intergenerational. My view is that persons have to be and need to value being interdependent with other age groups as well as our own, intradependent within our age group so that we produce programs and activities and knowledge. Knowledge is very important about issues of aging. For example, we're engaged now in age-friendly communities. And what does that mean? It means that we are trying to enable local governance all over the world, and we have members of age-friendly communities all over the world, to be aware of safety needs of older persons, more aware of elder abuse, which is a terrible issue to be contended with, issues of poverty, issues of urbanization, all of which will subsume older persons. All of us in the aging community reach out to the member states. For example, when we were discussing, and we're going to be discussing it again, the Convention on the Human Rights of Older Persons, many of us in the Committee on Aging, and AARP has played a great role in that, as well as IFA, in visiting the member states on an individual basis. We make appointments. Hopefully we'll meet with ambassadors or meet with the undersecretaries who are in those missions who are interested in aging or have in their portfolio social service needs, which incorporates from birth to death issues at all levels. So we continue to do that as much as we can. We've done that with the open-ended working group on human rights for older persons, and we've been doing it with the groups that are meeting, the member states that are meeting around the post-2015 program. We want to be in their document. We were not in the Millennium Development Goals at all. And when I was, not I particularly, we invited one of the members of that division to a meeting and we said, how dare you? We are here. Well, it's implied in all of the development goals, which is not good enough because much of the thinking at the UN and in too many other places around the world, people don't exist after a certain age. In some cases, if you're 49 plus, you don't count. If you're 60 plus, you don't count. And that's where elder abuse comes in, where disregard comes in. We're all important.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. 3 weeks ago, I spoke with Helen on her 98th birthday. I reflected with her on the progress we did make with the adoption of Agenda 2030, so that among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 15 contain specific or implied references to older persons. That is progress. Not enough, but it's progress. I think this pandemic will certainly join the major historical events of our time. And as pointed out, that COVID-19 is a human rights issue. Older persons are the main victims of COVID-19, but are not the main agents of its spread. We need to act to ensure equality of all people, but particularly for older persons. I would like to close with a quote from Sasha Sidorenko's blog on older persons and COVID-19, and I quote, "Based on the international policy frameworks on aging, such as MIPA, older persons should be seen as contributors to the reestablishment and reconstruction of communities and the rebuilding of the social fabric following emergencies." Yes, this pandemic changes the way we are feeling and addressing aging. It deserves our attention and action to ensure the decade of healthy aging can be realized and recognition that older persons' rights are human rights. The last point to leave you with is Secretary General in embarking on the asking us all a simple question for our future.
What if there was, there's plenty of what ifs.
What if we didn't have corruption,
persecuciones o guerras,
HIV,
ageism,
discrimination,
stigma?
ماذا لو فهم الجميع في العالم معنى أن تكون مهاجراً بعيداً عن أهلك، بعيداً عن ناسك، بعيداً عن وطنك؟
I always think, what if my home just disappears? What if my whole country disappears? And what if my daughter never gets to see it?
What if the world was cleaner?
What if my child could grow up in a world where climate change wasn't a constant threat and where cities were pollution-free?
أمنيتي إلها خاصة بعدل الفرق بين المدينة وبرات المدينة.
Tous les jours, on voit les villes grandir, on voit un exode rural des populations, et cela vient avec beaucoup de problèmes, des problèmes de logement, des problèmes d'insalubrité, des problèmes de santé publique.
By 2050, globally, there will be more people over the age of 60 than children. So we need to plan for age-friendly cities.
Но это единственным образом можно решить. Один шаг за шагом.
There's so many people that have nothing, and there's so few people that have a lot. And you think about inequality. It's so important to understand that we need a world that is more equal.
What if we lived in a world where all that mattered was how we cared about each other.
We're all deserving of the same kind of care and love and health and education. And these are just all basic necessities that we should all have access to.
世界上的贫富差距应该可以减少，而且将会有更多的工作机会给新的一代。
New technology can do things that are completely undreamt of. What if it was used for bringing education to rural areas?
Tout ce que je suis devenu, c'est vraiment cette éducation que j'ai reçue à la base. Et je pense que si moi je peux accéder à cette éducation, tous les enfants du monde doivent avoir accès à ça aussi.
如果全世界一起合作，打造一个共享的网络空间，那么所有人都能够参与数字经济。
¿Qué tal si en el mundo nos escucháramos?
When we bring our minds together, those ideas become innovation.
I think my only what if out of many what ifs would be, what if every young person was empowered to reach their full potential?
What if the world was a more secure place for young people like me?
Мы все в этом мире временные. Y у нас есть путь выбрать.
Cuando digo que hace falta solidaridad entre países, también es solidaridad entre las personas.
What if all the nations understand that we are so powerful? We should be the instrument of peace. We should be the peace.
What if leaders and communities would understand that they should use dialogue and not conflict to address their differences?
Si c'est possible.
Do I think this is possible? Yes, because I'm an optimist.
I'm an optimist.
We need your opinions, your strategies, your ideas for us to be able to deliver better for the people of the world that we must serve.
We can change this game.
It is absolutely essential that you all join the conversation.
Everybody has to contribute. We don't have an option.
Everybody needs to talk. We need to come together.
What would the world be like